Being a horror fan is not for the faint of heart. And I'm not talking about the jump scares, shocking crimes, or gruesome villains. The actual process of seeking out good horror movies is not for the faint of heart. Most horror just isn't very good. That's why it's all the more rewarding when we find a diamond in the rough, a horror film that is a cut above the rest. But even then, that doesn't often translate to sustained success. Many of the absolute most beloved horror films receive just as much, if not more, vitriol for their later sequels as they do love for their standout entries. Even my favorite franchises have their baffling moments, like Elle jumping onto a moving plane or the kids chanting in Stranger Things.
Back to the light! Back to the light! Back to the light! Back to the light!
But one franchise never seems to have a huge misfire, and that, as you already know because you clicked on this video, is the Ice Cream Man franchise. Okay, fine, I've never seen an Ice Cream Man movie, but I am talking about the Scream franchise. Don't get me wrong, it definitely peaks with the first movie, but the sequels are all pretty entertaining and serviceable. Sure, there are little gripes to be had as the series goes along, but unlike me trying to dance at a 90s rave, there are no major embarrassments here, at least in terms of the movies. I still haven't seen the Scream MTV series, and I've really never had any motivation to. It's actually kind of amazing that there's a spin-off of a top 10 highest grossing horror franchise and nobody ever talks about it. But despite the movies being a pretty consistent mark of quality, I can't help but feel that things have gotten a little bland over the past few years. It's like the early Scream movies have this intangible aura that makes them special, and I wanted to revisit what made them so special and what caused the franchise to become just a little blandified in recent years. It's like Scream is Mom's home-cooked spaghetti and meatballs, and Scream Sticks is when you order the menu item called Mom's Spaghetti and Meatballs at Macaroni Grill. Both good, both nutritious, but Macaroni Grill just doesn't have that soulfulness that you get from your actual mom. I'm just realizing that's a weird analogy to make about a series that revolves around the murder of the main character's mom, but if you're not Sidney Prescott, you get the idea. To understand how the series got off track, we've got to start with the original. This video is sponsored by BetterHelp. The first thing anyone thinks of when they think of Scream is Ghostface, but we've had like 100 of those and they're in every movie, so that's clearly not the X factor. But the first thing I think of when thinking about the first Scream in particular is the setting. Scream follows Sidney Prescott, a high school student who fears for her life when a serial killer goes after her classmates around the 1-year anniversary of her mother's murder. It's set in the small town of Woodsboro, California. Woodsboro is a fictional, small town USA type of place, but the movie was shot mostly on location in and around Santa Rosa, California. And it really shows in the gorgeous expanse of nature soaked in golden sunlight all around Sidney's house. The school bus drops her off right at her property because there are no other students living within walking distance of her, just wilderness as far as the eye can see. Many people have pointed out that the huge deck decorated with tables and 10 chairs being overkill for a house occupied by one girl and her dad, but I like to imagine that when Maureen was alive, they'd host parties with their friends with no fear of disturbing any neighbors, because there are none for miles. According to the Census Bureau, only about 14% of Americans live in rural areas, but even among those, Woodsboro is a breath of fresh mountain air. Unlike the suburban conformity of the films that Scream is a satire of, Woodsboro is a vast woodland community, where your neighbors probably aren't close enough to hear you scream.
Door's locked, I heard screaming.
That's only because he was already there. But these spread out neighborhoods are not at the expense of having a community. Between the high school, the downtown shopping district, and the video store, gossip still gets around, and fear spreads pretty quickly when there's a killer on the loose. A lot of times in horror, we see these generic suburban locations, and I think the idea is to scare the audience. It's so copy and paste that it could be your hometown. But the problem is, a lot of those settings feel like they don't have their own identity. I mean, look at Nightmare on Elm Street for fuck's sake. They literally retconned it from California to Ohio. You know it's generic when you can swap it for the meme state. Woodsboro has Northern California as part of its identity. The isolation, the ability to hide a car in the woods, the timid police officer who's afraid of his younger sister. They're all things that give Scream 1 a character, and they all stem from the setting. I guess technically there was some interchangeability with Woodsboro. The original script was actually set in screenwriter Kevin Williamson's home state of North Carolina, in a town 15 minutes from where he grew up called Bayboro. It's not known why the setting was changed so drastically, but Williamson would eventually use the coastal North Carolina setting for other projects, like I Know What You Did Last Summer, and as a stand-in for Massachusetts in Dawson's Creek. But I like Woodsboro. When I watch Scream, it feels like I'm being transported into their world, not just watching a story play out in my own. And part of that is because Scream is not just another horror story. It's a satire of horror movies in general. That original script with the Bayboro setting that I mentioned, back then the title was Scary Movie. More than anything, Scream is a story that wants to call attention to the tropes of horror movies, while also being one of those movies. Characters are quizzed on horror trivia, speculate on who the killer might be using movie logic, and even acknowledge the rules of survival in one of these movies. Rule number 3 is to never, under any circumstances, say, "I'll be right back." So, see you in a few seconds? Is this what's going on in your head? Good, because this video is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's February, and the truth is, most New Year's resolutions fade in a month. If you want to succeed at your goals, it's better to make small, consistent habits rather than one grand resolution. Therapy works the same way. There's no quick fix for that screaming in your head, but when therapy is part of your routine, you can understand yourself, grow, and build lasting support for your well-being. In the same way that I go to the gym regularly to take care of my physical health, ongoing therapy is the best way to take care of your mental health. All you have to do is fill out this questionnaire, and BetterHelp will do all the work of matching you to the right licensed therapist based on your preferences and their clinical experience. And it's so easy to switch therapists for free if it's not a good fit. The old therapist won't disappear from the real world, but you don't want that on your conscience anyway. So don't wait. Melt away your stress by joining the 6 million plus people who have gotten help from BetterHelp, the platform you can trust. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/CZsWorld and get 10% off your first month of therapy. That's betterhelp.com/CZsWorld to experience the sweet sound of silence in your head. It's not the first time a movie has gone meta. Heck, Scream's director Wes Craven literally just did it 2 years earlier with New Nightmare, a film set in the real world where A Nightmare on Elm Street is just a movie. But it's another choice that gives Scream a little more character than another 1996 slasher such as The Dentist. Actually, The Dentist has plenty of character, it's just not the charming kind. I love the synopsis for The Dentist. Dr. Ellen Feinstone is a rich and successful Beverly Hills dentist. There's only one problem. He's insane. Yeah, I guess that would be a problem. There's one more thing that makes Scream more memorable than The Dentist though, and that is the soundtrack. Where The Dentist had all opera and classical composers, Scream is a high school movie and gets a huge shot of adolescence by using high energy tracks of the time. Most of Scream's needle drops actually happen at the end of the movie, during the party that Stu throws because his parents are out of town. I was surprised to find that while some of these tracks are classics now, standouts like Bird Brain's Youth of America and Republica's Drop Dead Gorgeous actually made their debut in Scream.
I know my ex-girlfriend lies. Oh, she does it every time. It's just a permanent disguise. Yeah, but she's drop dead gorgeous.
That's me trying to sing while imitating a British accent, neither of which I should be doing. Other tracks like Moby's First Cool Hive and Nick Cave's Red Right Hand were released before Scream, but if you look them up now, they're mostly remembered for being in Scream. So with the exception of the end credits music, Scream's soundtrack didn't necessarily use songs that were popular at the time, but they were songs that were of the time. And there are pros and cons to this strategy. Sometimes a few years can go by and a soundtrack can make a movie feel dated a lot faster. But I think that's far outweighed by the pros here. Scream's soundtrack gives it character and charm. It feels like it has to take place in the 90s in the same way that Woodsboro feels like it has to be in Northern California. Plus, these songs are just bops, but when it comes to the music, there's another movie that's got me ready to throw Scream 1 soundtrack to the curb. Everyone thinks that Scream 2 is just about blowjobs, but it's not true. From the opening hip-hop infused cover of Prince's She's Always in My Hair, Scream 2 uses its needle drops as pools of immersion for the viewer, where the first movie songs were more like decorative waterfalls. Your Lucky Day in Hell by Eels is the perfect way to reintroduce us to this college version of Sydney, given what's about to happen to her, and The Swing by Everclear, that's the clip I just played, one of the most goated transitions of all time. The former was a single released by a fairly new band ahead of their first album, and the latter was a song that was cut from an established band's recently released third album. So it was once again a case of the movie giving the songs exposure, not the other way around. The film was even supposed to end with the Verve's Bittersweet Symphony, which had been a hit in the summer of 1997, but due to clearance issues, it was changed to She Said by Collective Soul, which also has a beautiful string section fitting for Sydney's victorious stroll across the campus lawn after having dodged another set of grisly murders. So why do I bring up all this music stuff? Is it to promote my other channel, Pumpkin Metal, where I post pop punk and metal band history episodes? No, but thank you for asking. It's more about how the songs captured the feeling of the era. I feel like using the biggest pop songs from 96 and 97 would have caused these movies to blend in with every other movie that uses those songs. By choosing great songs that aren't popular yet, the tracks will either go down as that song made famous by Scream or that song that people only know from Scream. And I can't emphasize enough how these songs are often about being young and fit so well tonally for a duology about high school and college students. Which reminds me, I should probably remind you about Scream 2's plot. Sidney Prescott is in college now, and her story from Scream 1 has been adapted into a horror movie called Stab. But when a woman is murdered at a Stab screening nearby and bodies start piling up at her college, Sidney suspects someone in her inner circle could be the new Ghostface. So the setting this time is Windsor College, a large university in Ohio. This location doesn't quite have the same feeling of specificity that Woodsboro did in the first one. It was shot between Agnes Scott College in Georgia and UCLA in, well, LA. So while it does kind of feel like any college in the US, it's not entirely generic. When you watch Scream 2, you feel like you know the type of person who goes to Windsor College. It has this air of smug, pretentious elitism, and that's communicated through the set dressing and cinematography, which has us sweeping across those vibrant manicured lawns where not one blade of grass is out of place, and through its characters, like the sorority sisters who would sooner take a knife than miss a party, or the fraternity bros whose traditions are so important they'll publicly crucify Sidney's boyfriend for giving her his Greek letters. Like the music, the way the Windsor College setting is handled firmly entrenches it as a certain type of college from a certain era.
Who is this?
You tell me.
Corey Gillis, 5550176.
Also, just as a Scream fan, I feel like I know and love Windsor College. I want to credit the fact that they took the time and money to shoot the exteriors of so many locations and even show how they connect from time to time. We actually follow Sidney out of the dorms towards the building where Randy has his film class. Then we see them walk from there to the quad, where Randy does this British accent for some unknown reason.
It's not. A lot of shit happens at the movies. People get robbed, shot, maimed, murdered. Multiplex is just a very dangerous place to be these days.
But are we complaining? No, because it's funny. We see how the drama theater is on the edge of campus, and to tie it all together, at the end, we see that the film school must be right on the other side of the theater, and Sidney walks back to the dorms where it all began. None of this is necessary to tell the story, but it makes the place feel alive in a way that not all college movies bother with. I feel like I know my way around Windsor College, despite the fact that it's not a real college and was filmed at multiple locations. But at the end of the day, Scream 2 has one big question mark to overcome, and that's the fact that it's a sequel.
Cause let's face it, baby, these days, you gotta have a sequel.
One of the most common pitfalls for sequels is that they feel forced because they only exist to capitalize on the success of the first film, which already tells a complete story. But the way Scream 2 was approached was brilliant because it not only gives a valid reason that a sequel should exist, but it also lays the blueprint that legitimizes the existence of all future films after that, at least the ones directed by Wes Craven. And the solution they use is actually pretty simple. The tagline of the first film is "Someone has taken their love of scary movies one step too far," and the whole thing satirizes the concept of the slasher genre. So for Scream 2, the next logical step is to satirize the very concept of sequels. Randy lays out specific rules for horror sequels, the killers make their operation a sequel to the murders that happened in Woodsboro, and the lore expands in a way that you would expect from a sequel. It even pokes fun at the lack of originality in sequels.
Is that the best you can do? Because Billy and Stu were much more original.
It seems like such an obvious choice nearly 30 years on, but it's one of those bold sequel choices that made it possible to go from standalone movie to franchise. I'd put it right up there with Halloween 2 making Michael and Laurie siblings and giving Michael a reason to hunt down the rest of his family for the rest of the original timeline, or how Saw 2 introduces the idea that Jigsaw is teaching his disciples to carry on his message by holding their own survival games. Each of these are sequel ideas that gave purpose to extending the franchise, and that's what opened the window for Scream 3. Instead of retreading the territory of being themed around a horror sequel like Scream 2, the third film serves as a caricature of trilogy conclusion films. This time, a couple years have gone by, and the killer, or killers, come after the cast and crew of Stab 3. Sidney is drawn out of her secluded life of hiding and forced to travel to Hollywood, where she uncovers the truth about her mom's death 4 years prior and comes face to face with the villain who set her late 90s nightmare into motion. We once again get a new set of rules, this time for not just another sequel, but for the concluding chapter of a trilogy. Its influences are less about horror and more about movie trilogies in general. Randy, in his posthumous video message, even mentions that a concluding trilogy is a rarity in horror, but it does exist. We've got a cameo from Carrie Fisher, who famously discovered a major plot twist in the most iconic trilogy of all time, and once again, the crimes themselves are set up to resemble the conclusion of a trilogy, not just the events of the movie.
Well, all I know about movie trilogies is that in the third one, all bets are off.
There's a consistent narrative parallel between the events of Scream 3 and the events of Stab 3 Return to Woodsboro, which is also the conclusion of the Stab trilogy. While Stab 3 is a literal return to Woodsboro, Scream 3 is more of a symbolic one. The Return to Woodsboro is more about reinvestigating the events that took place there. Scream 3 is set entirely in Hollywood, the first real location in the Scream franchise. The opening sequence is a high-speed race down Vine Street and Hollywood Boulevard, right past the iconic Capitol Records building and the Pantages Theater, both symbols of the stranglehold that big-budget entertainment companies have on the city. To me, the setting of Scream 3 always felt genuine. Sometimes when Hollywood movies depict something, you get what we call the Hollywood version, like how low and middle class families in sitcoms will live in this huge apartment, or how students in high school movies will be played by hot 27-year-olds with no acne. Hollywood doesn't always depict itself accurately.
Thank God we're back in Hollywood, where people treat each other right.
But as someone who lives in LA and has experienced studio filmmaking firsthand, I think at least in terms of the setting, Scream 3 nails it, which wasn't hard to do. When your story takes place at a movie studio, you basically have to film on location by default. Sunrise Studios, the movie studio responsible for making the Stab films, was filmed at the CBS Studio Center. And there are scenes on the backlot, at sound stages, on the movie set, at production offices, and in the studio archives. And by the way, even though it doesn't fit into the themes that I'm mostly talking about in this video, I just wanted to say that I love this scene. The reporter, Gail Weathers, and Jennifer Jolie, who is playing Gail in the movie, sneak down into the archives to learn more about Maureen Prescott's past in Hollywood. Jennifer is in character as a larger-than-life Gail, and Gail is increasingly annoyed at the way that she's being depicted, but their combined skills and assets help them dig up the truth. And they occasionally sync up with one another.
Back in what?
There's so much creativity here, and I think it works because it's fun and it's a new way for us to interact with an old character. Whereas a lot of characters in the newer films are just like, yep, here's the new Sydney, here's the new Randy, here's the new Billy, but these characters are more or less functionally the same as the ones that you grew up with. They make the obvious Star Wars comparison in Scream 3, but that analogy is even more relevant today, with the Star Wars sequel trilogy largely just marching out new versions of the characters and events from the originals, leading to fans reevaluating and finding new appreciation for the prequel trilogy, once maligned for changing too much, but now celebrated for trying something new. Again, I generally like Screams 5 and 6. They are nowhere near as bad as the Star Wars sequel trilogy, but I think they lack the confidence to try fun new scenes like some of the scenes that play out in Screams 3 and 4. And it's easy to see the reason that this happens. When you're the original creator of a franchise, you can mess with it all you want and nobody can come for you. But when you're taking over a beloved franchise created by a legend, there's a lot of pressure to get it right, and oftentimes that ends up coming at the expense of innovation. Wes Craven died, and George Lucas sold Star Wars, and the new guard for each series is playing it safe and sticking with what worked in the past. But anyway, back to the Hollywood setting. While there are a lot of scenes centered around the movie studio, the other locations chosen do a perfect job of placing us into the world of Hollywood entertainment. Dewey and Gail meet for lunch at the Replay Cafe in West Hollywood, which feels like an authentic Tinseltown table house because it is one. It's still there, but it's been renamed to some French thing. At the end of that scene, there's a Hollywood rental truck that goes by in the background. Again, it's not a part of the story, they didn't have to put this here, but it's the perfect subtle reminder of how entertainment is the fabric of this town, making Hollywood the ideal setting for a series about killers who take their love of movies one step too far. Whether it's Jennifer Jolie's scenic house in the hills overlooking Los Angeles, or John Milton's mansion where casting couches are standard decorative furniture, Scream 3 is filled with beautiful locations that reflect the character of Los Angeles and the movie industry that put the city on the map in the first place. The soundtrack for Scream 3 is one of the most divisive in the entire series, with its fans saying that it's the best by far and its haters saying it's complete trash. But what I found out about it may surprise you. Now, you would think that a movie set in the heart of the entertainment industry would be the one to throw everything that the LA music scene has to offer at the audience, with bombastic transitions, ironic counterpoints, and montages. But none of that really happens. Scream 3 just loves its diegetic tracks, the music that exists within the world of the film that the characters can hear. Ghostface puts on What If by Creed to distract Cotton's girlfriend, we hear So Real by Static X in Sarah Darling's car, then Fuel's Sunburn and Finger 11 Suffocate can be heard playing in the background on speakers during the rap party. The only non-diegetic track is Red Right Hand, which is only in there because it's been in every Scream movie so far, and it's basically become the series theme song at this point. So does this mean that the soundtrack is kinda weak? No, not at all. It's actually one of the strongest in my opinion. It's just implemented in the most subtle way possible. In my System of a Down video on Pumpkin Metal, I said that the song Spiders was featured on the official soundtrack for Scream 3, but it isn't in the movie. But I recently found out that I was actually wrong about that. It's implemented in the most Scream 3 way possible, for less than a second on a car radio as it goes by in the background. I'm not making this up.
Well,
Here you go.
Thank you.
If I get a copyright claim for showing that, I am going to burn down a school. Your move, Sony Music Entertainment. But as much as they try to hide it from you, the Scream 3 soundtrack does something that the others don't really do by having a coherent stylistic consistency, which is a fancy way of saying it's all nu metal. Now, was this a part of the artistic vision of music supervisor Ed Girard, channeling that trademark cathartic rage of the genre to match what Sidney Prescott was going through as she was pulled out of hiding to face the demons of her past? Maybe, or maybe it's just because nu metal was popular at the time. Either way, no other Scream movie sticks to a single music genre like this, and it gives the movie a stronger sonic identity than the others. When you hear any of these songs, it's easy to say that's from Scream 3. And when you watch Scream 3, the music gives you a feeling that you don't get from any of the other movies. Like the Hollywood setting, it's something that makes Scream 3 special, and I kinda like that. The song in the middle of the end credits is This the End by Creed. But would this really be the end? No, obviously not. I've already made reference to the fact that there are more Scream movies after this, so it should have been extremely obvious that the story is not over. Screeform, or as it is occasionally spelled, Scream 4, finally came out after an 11-year wait. And in my opinion, it was a wait well worth it, because this is the best Scream sequel. It takes place 15 years after the Woodsboro murders from Scream 1. Sydney visits Woodsboro for a book signing of her new autobiography, Out of Darkness, while a new generation of teenagers are terrorized by another set of ghostface killers, one of which is Sydney's cousin, Jill Roberts. As the murders get closer and closer to home, the old gang has to come out of horror movie character retirement to try to put a stop to this new threat. Like the Scream movies before it, it's a satire of a very specific type of movie. If Scream was a satire of slashers, Scream 2 was a satire of horror sequels, and Scream 3 was a satire of trilogy concluding chapters, the fourth one satirizes requels, the halfway in between remake and sequel. It's a remake in the sense that the franchise starts over with new characters and plot while retreading familiar storylines, but it's a sequel in the sense that it exists in the same continuity as the previous films, usually featuring legacy characters who come back to pass the torch down to a new generation. The earliest use of the word requel I could find was from this 2007 article in the Virginia Chronicle, where it's used to describe certain Bond films and later Star Trek entries. A closer example is Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where Indy's son enters the picture for a new adventure after many years. So there weren't a ton of requels for the next Scream to work with, and the term requel wasn't really being used yet, but that wasn't an issue, because it focused its satire on just a regular remake, but opted to have it take place in the same continuity as the first three films, whereas a traditional remake would reset the continuity. In this sense, Screeform actually became one of the first requels, setting the trend that movies like Star Wars The Force Awakens, Jurassic World, and Halloween 2018 would follow. But while it got the concept and the story right, this is where the franchise starts to slip just a tiny bit in terms of the distinctive character and atmosphere that make the first three special. We go back to Woodsboro for the first time since Scream 1. But remember all that stuff I said about how Woodsboro is this unique woodland community and not just the typical copy and paste suburbia that you would usually find in these types of films? Yeah, it's just kind of suburbia now. They filmed this one in Michigan, and it really shows. We did see this kind of town square area in the first one during the curfew lockup, but the version in the fourth movie feels less like the town you drive into to rent a video for the weekend, and more like the park where you go to walk your dog. The school they found for Woodsboro High is a pretty good match until you look out the window and see the high-density apartment buildings across the street. Remember how I said in Woodsboro, your neighbors probably aren't close enough to hear you scream? Well, forget that. In this one, we literally see Jill's neighbor get knifed next door about 20 feet away. The barn is a cool location, where the high school cinema club holds their annual stab marathon in a scene that evokes Stu Macher's party without going too far and copying it, but there's nothing else. Just cookie-cutter suburban houses and a generic hospital. Musically, this was pretty unmemorable. I had to go back and scroll through the movie because I did not remember any of the songs that were in this. And I'm pretty sure if I started listing tracks, it wouldn't do much to jog your memory. Something to Die For by The Sounds, Yeah 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 by The Sounds, Make My Body by Campton Mohogger, Endless Whispers by Blackcoat Gentlemen's Club. So I actually made that last one up, but you didn't even notice because it sounds like it could be generic 2010s music. Whatever, at least they didn't put any stomp clap hey in this.
We are young.
The only song that really did anything for me was Denial by Stereo Black, which is another Spiders situation where we only hear it for a couple seconds from a passing car.
Speaking of which, Trevor's here. What?
Hey, Kirby.
At this point, it feels like they're doing this on purpose to make it look like the soundtrack is stronger than it really is. I can't really put all of the blame on the movie for this though. This was effectively the first Scream movie to come out in the social media age, and I think the internet widened the divide between alternative culture and normie culture more than ever before.
Don't blame your internet connection.
Like in 2000, Creed or System of a Down were alt metal, but they would still get play on the radio. But by 2011, you were either someone who downloaded Sorry for Party Rocking or Let's Cheers to This to your MP3 player, and then proceeded not to bother with the other one that you did not download. Imagine? Guess which camp I was in. I think Scream tried to do the indie rock in between, and honestly, the soundtrack isn't terrible, but it didn't give us anything memorable either. Besides the fact that Bad Karma by Ida Maria is in this and is a banger, but it's the end credits song, so the movie is over at that point. Go home. Actually, stay here, don't go anywhere. It probably sounds like I wasn't the biggest fan of the fourth movie, but that's anything but the case. One of the Requel rules that the characters spell out is about subverting expectations, which really made this one a fun time.
But you're the dumb blonde with the big tits.
I have a 4.0 GPA and 135 IQ, asshole.
And this, coupled with a good story and the best villain we've seen since '96, aren't enough to make me hate suburban Woodsboro and way too much Bloom effect. Guys, what are we doing here? It looks like Wind Waker HD before the update. But before we got our next update, in the Scream franchise that is, another 11 years went by. Wes Craven passed away in 2015, which meant Scream would have to continue on without its original director. But in 2022, the next entry would be released.
Back against the wall, middle fingers in the air, busting through the crowd.
So what would the angle be this time? After taking off on horror movies, sequels, trilogies, and requels, and a decade to think of the next idea, surely the new Scream was going to blow our minds with the new format. What? What do you mean they just did requels again? They already did that in the last movie. Yeah, they just did requels again. There's some very tiny part of me that understands why they did this. Like I said earlier, requel wasn't really a common term yet when the fourth movie came out, but since then there had been a bunch of requels, and they all kind of did the same thing. Rehashed the plot of the original while having a new cast of young characters meet the old guard. And usually the title is the exact same as the original movie. Halloween 2018, Candyman 2021, and now Scream 2022. Even though the fourth film basically already uses the title format if you squint hard enough. Okay, so they're trying to do this new trend of requels as opposed to the last movie where they were partially satirizing remakes. Even though 4 perfectly fits in with the 2010s requel trend, maybe they thought they were doing something different. But then that begs the question, why didn't you do something different? Scream 2022 takes us back to Woodsboro, again. It introduces a new generation of student knife blocks, again. Some of the new generation has family ties to characters from the original, again. The new protagonist, Sam Carpenter, is actually the bastard daughter of Billy Loomis from Scream, and this is kind of a spoiler, so feel free to skip to the next chapter to avoid it, but I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the movies if you're this far into the video. But the Ghostface duo in this movie is a secret couple who became obsessed with the Woodsboro murders after seeing Stab and learning how close they are to the tragedy, so they enact a plan on the anniversary of the murders with the goal of achieving viral fame on the internet. That's literally so specific. Why did you have to steal that from the fourth one? The only difference is that Jill wants to be famous because she's jealous of her cousin Sydney and she doesn't want to have to get a traditional job, while Amber is a literal Redditor who wanted the story to go viral so that they could make a better Stab movie out of it. And while 4 at least made subverting expectations part of its design philosophy, 5 is the exact opposite of that. And the result is that anything that wasn't stolen from 4 could easily be predicted anyways because it follows the exact same pattern as the first movie. Ugh. This is now the 3rd movie to take place in Woodsboro, but instead of going back to Sonoma County, they shot this one in Wilmington, North Carolina. I guess Kevin Williamson finally got his wish of having Woodsboro be in his home state, but I'm not sure that it stacks up to some of the other locations that we've seen in this series. I think about the beautiful shots of Northern California, the perfectly manicured quads of Windsor College, and the breathtaking overlooks of the Hollywood Hills. And it looks like we've traded them for the bowling alley parking lots, pee-pee flavored dive bar, a trailer park, more soccer mom suburbia, a dark and cloudy Strode, another generic hospital, and the big twist location, Stu Macher's house, again. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that every location has to be a postcard. Sometimes a poverty location will better serve the story that you're trying to tell. Or maybe Woodsboro has changed over the years and these sets are trying to convey that. But it isn't really addressed in the story at all, and I honestly just have a hard time believing that this is Woodsboro anymore. And if it is, it's lost the charm that made Woodsboro such a captivating place to tell a story. One area where this does improve a little bit is probably the music. I was not optimistic about this going in, because every Scream movie uses music that at least echoes the music of the time period, which in this case was probably going to be hip-hop, which just doesn't feel like it fits into a Scream movie. But honestly, this was fine. The title track is Just Us by DJ Khaled, but they took out the vocal parts of Khaled stroking his own ego.
We the best music!
No, DJ Khaled, it's not the best music. I don't hate it, okay? But I don't think it's literally the best music. That's a bold claim, dude. I do like it here, though. It shoots some energy into the scene. My favorite drop was just a couple minutes later when we check back into Woodsboro High School to the sound of the aptly titled The American Scream by Alkaline Trio. It's good to get some punk in there, even if they cheated by using a song from 2010. Guys, what if I start out every video from now on by screaming out, "Hey, we the best videos!" Red Right Hand is in it again after being absent from the fourth one, but this time it's played as a diegetic sound through the car speakers, which can only mean that this is the movie's way of telling us that Red Right Hand is also in the Stab films and everyone associates the song with Ghostface because of it. Outside of my gripes, I think the cast of new characters is pretty good. Dragging out Billy Loomis again was kind of desperate, but at least it sets up a potentially interesting character quandary for the new protagonist, Sam Carpenter. I don't know, man. The movie is extremely mid. The whole idea here seems to be to do a Force Awakens type requel, which basically tells us that the movie is going to do exactly what you expect it to. And it does that, but is that really what we want from the cinema experience? To me, I want to get exactly what I expect when I'm getting fast food or when I'm dealing with the utility company, not at the movie theater. But it's far from the first movie I've had this complaint about. It seems like pretty much every requel exists in part to reintroduce people to the franchise with something safe, then hopefully after that you get something with a little bit of bite. We didn't have to wait long to get Scream 6, but would it have that mom spaghetti flavor to it, or would it be as bland as its predecessor? I still remember the day I found out that Scream 6 was going to take place in New York City. The first thing we saw in the trailer was this big shot of Times Square, and it ended by showing us that NYC subway scene, complete with the little chime that happens when you get to a stop on the subway. Then there were the taglines. New York, new rules. In a city of millions, no one hears you scream. And who could forget the posters, all of which either had a piece of the NYC skyline or showed Ghostface in the subway. By everything they were putting out, one would assume that Scream 6 was not just set in New York City, but that New York was an important part of the film's DNA, integral to the story that they were trying to tell, just like LA was to the third film. I mean, they weren't filming in New York City, it would be shot in Montreal, but was that really anything to be concerned about? They'd surely get a few key scenes on location and film the interiors in Montreal to save money. On Mario Day 2023, which strangely was not the release date of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which came out a month after that, Scream 6 was released. And it really didn't do anything with the New York setting. It was just incredibly generic. With one exception, you could basically swap in any other city and it wouldn't change the movie at all. The scenes taking place at a restaurant, a college party, at Sam and Tara's apartment complex, and at an old movie theater literally aren't specific to the Big Apple at all. There's one scene where Ghostface comes after them in a bodega, which I liked. If you've never been to New York, a bodega is like a convenience store slash deli that tends to be open late. You could certainly make the argument that Scream 6 makes the artistic choice to avoid big landmarks, instead opting to show us the real New York, the side of the city that the actual residents encounter on a daily basis. In that sense, the subway scene was the perfect setting. But when they filmed everything in Montreal and just stuck a couple of establishing shots of the Brooklyn Bridge at the beginning, it just ends up feeling like a hollow imitation of New York. There's one scene where Sam and Tara walk around in a park as the team tries to trace a call from Ghostface. And I'm just thinking, why couldn't this be Central Park? It's a recognizable location important to the culture of New York, but it's also part of the real New Yorker experience. I'm not asking for the characters to shoot down Ghostface atop the Empire State Building or to hear Hello Samantha echoing through Times Square, but I'm pretty sure that shot of Times Square from the trailer wasn't even in the movie. And that's what feels weird about it. The fact that this took place in New York was such a big part of the marketing and hype train for this movie. Pun kinda intended. I don't ever like to fault the filmmakers for false expectations set up by the marketing, but I will fault them for not doing a little bit more to make it feel not like Montreal.
Where from?
Michigan.
Wait, is that a reference to Scream 4 being filmed in Michigan? You could honestly make the case that the setting here is less about New York City and more about the fact that the characters are in college at Blackmore University, which from what I can tell is basically the in-universe NYU. So it's the second time that our main characters are in college, but that kind of leads me to my other major complaint about this movie. And again, I think these new Scream movies are fine. I enjoyed watching them. This video is more about figuring out where they lost the magic sauce that made the earlier films such classics. What is the focus of its commentary? We've done slashers, sequels, trilogy concluding chapters, requels, and requels again. So it's definitely time for something new, right?
The way I see it, someone is out to make a sequel to the requel.
Dude, are you kidding me? So for all intents and purposes, they're doing a requel for the third time in a row now? Is that the best you can do? Because Billy and Stu were much more original. The rules for a requel sequel basically just amount to bigger and better, but we quickly come to realize that it's just a rehash of Scream 2. The characters are in college in another state, there are new suspects in the form of roommates and love interests, the final girl from the previous movie is dealing with unwanted attention from the press, the previous final girl has police protection, the opening kill is a film buff and Stab fan, there are nostalgic clues left behind at each crime scene, there's the aforementioned searching for a ghostface caller while walking in a park scene, the whole setup repeats Scream 2 just as much as Scream 2022 repeats Scream 1. So it was absolutely no surprise that the ending was just an exact repeat of the ending of Scream 2. The main Ghostface is the vengeful parent of one of the Ghostfaces killed in the previous movie, supported by the people he or she enrolled into the college to get closer to the victim. We're just going in circles at this point. And why does it always have to be a family member? Out of the 6 Scream movies so far, we've had 2 guilty boyfriends and 4 guilty family members. Can they not give the killer a motive if they're not related to another killer or victim? It's just so overdone at this point. But at least with Scream 2, Nancy Loomis was kind of out of left field, but at least she was avenging one of the coolest characters the series has ever seen. But the villains in Scream 6 are avenging Richie Kirsch from Scream 5, the terminally online Reddit loser who was butthurt about the Stab sequels not being what he wanted, the dude who managed to kill one person while his teenage girlfriend did all the heavy lifting. The thing is, they don't just avenge Richie, they idolize him. His homemade Stab movies are playing on the projector over the entire finale of the movie, all for someone who already did little to build on the motives of the previous killers, Jill and Charlie, from the 4th one. Seeing that the directors who came in for the 5th one returned for Scream 6, it all feels very self-aggrandizing. All of this seems to stem from the idea that they were too married to the idea of doing a sequel to the requel. And I think what hurts me the most is that there are so many cool concepts for Scream movies that I could come up with that I'd want to see more than 3 requel stories in a row. How about a Scream movie about Christmas installments? In addition to the entire genre of Christmas horror, there have been plenty of Christmas episodes in non-Christmas series, like The Conjuring 2 and Terrifier 3 that you could base the rules off of. And we've done requels to death at this point, but what about just an actual remake? In a perfect world, this would be if they actually made the entire movie of Stab and released it as something that we could watch. There's actually a lot of value there in terms of lore implications, because Scream is so well known, so anything they change will end up being a statement about remakes. I understand that Tori Spelling and David Schwimmer might be too old for that now, but you could even do an in-universe remake of Stab. It's the perfect opportunity to get all the benefits of a remake without actually resetting the continuity. Prequel would probably be another obvious choice, though I am a little less interested in that because we already know so much about the Maureen Prescott murder thanks to Scream 3. But spin-off is another huge untapped opportunity. Maybe that's what the TV series is, I have no idea, but there are endless possibilities for another story in the Scream world. They could follow in Halloween's footsteps and do a spin-off about the mask manufacturers of the Father Death mask, now terrorized by the very thing they created. And speaking of following in the footsteps of other horror franchises, it's almost appalling that Ghostface hasn't been involved in a versus movie yet, like Freddy vs. Jason or Alien vs. Predator. So yeah, I hope Scream 7 makes a stronger choice about the subject of its meta-commentary, and doesn't just throw up their hands and say, it's a requel, sequel. I guess I have to talk about the music in Scream 6 now for consistency's sake. It was basically not anything special. The title screen song was written just for the movie by Mike Shinoda, the surviving vocalist from Linkin Park. It's not bad. Then there's another 6 needle drops in the next 15 minutes, most of which are pop and hip hop songs at the frat party. It's a mix of songs from smaller artists, which didn't end up becoming relevant like the songs from Scream 1 and 2, and older songs by huge artists like Billie Eilish or Too Short, which don't qualify as music of the time like the songs in the early movies. Maybe it's just too early to be looking back at this soundtrack. Maybe in 2037 we'll look back at it as a bundle of nostalgia, but I kinda doubt it. This is not a huge knock against the movie. Like I said with Scream 4, the original Scream trilogy was released at the end of the monoculture, when people watched and listened to things that were advertised to them by big entertainment companies because that was the only option. All of the sequels after that were released in the post-monoculture, where more and more people use the internet to explore niche interests, which kind of ties in nicely with the themes of Scream 2022 and Scream 6. If Richie wasn't so obsessed with Stab fan culture online, we wouldn't even be here. At the time of writing, little is known about the upcoming Scream 7 other than the fact that Sydney is coming back into the spotlight, and it takes place in a small fictional town called Pine Grove, Indiana. This is definitely a Midwest suburbia, but seeing all the photos that have come out of the production give me hope that it can be an interesting location because of the attention to world building. That's what made Woodsboro work in the first place. The filmmakers gave it character and charm. The same can be said about the music in each film and the meta commentary. It's not just the characters themselves that should have character. But if you want to hear me talk about the characters, boy do I have the playlist for you. Click that box on the left for horror history episodes on Billy, Dewey, Randy, and soon to be many more. And if you love horror, make sure you subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell and select all notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.